Hello and welcome to this workshop for Minecraft Studio Scene Building Volume 12. And today we're going to be taking you through all the steps you need to be able to create not only backgrounds, but also foregrounds and various compositions to create essentially a triptych frame. So we'll be using the same elements, embellishing them, adding to them, lengthening them, so you can create something that looks a little bit like this. We're giving you all the knowledge you need to achieve this. And then what you'll be able to do at home is absolutely make this for yourself. But what you'll be doing is using that knowledge to create your own scenes as well. So let's dive straight into Minecraft Studio Scene Building Volume 12. So the first things first, you've got two ways of doing this, okay? Within the USB, we have given you pre-loaded scenes in a Minecraft Studio format, so you can use those and utilize those in your own projects as well. However, what I'm going to do in this workshop is take you through from the very start to your completed project. So we've plugged our USB into our computer. We click on Volume 12, we go into Artwork and then into Two Red Robins Scene Building Volume 12. Now the very first thing we want to do is create that background. So let's scroll down to our background builder and let's go ahead and start making. Now I don't know about you, but for me, what I like to do is start on a blank canvas. So here we've got our ruler and our grid line. Let's take those out by clicking them. We've got a nice blank space to be working on. First things first, let's go in with our landscapes, okay? So the background builder is all those elements you need broken down to create your own designs. Now, because I've pre-made this particular design, I already know which ones I'm going to be selecting, but I'll tell you what, it's a lot of fun going through these and then choosing the ones you want to work with. So for this demonstration, we are going to be working with image 31, which gives us a lovely grassy plain, hills, sort of valleys, lovely lush feeling to this. That's going to be our background of our design and we're going to work forward from there. So all we do, click, drag and drop. I'm going to extend that slightly just over the edges of the white canvas. So using those bounding boxes and just lengthening that ever so slightly across. The next layer that we want to go ahead and put down is something more towards the foreground because we're going to start building in perspective to this design. So number 30. You see, it's the same element that we have going on in the background here, but without the hills, okay? So this gives us a foreground, but so it feels different rather than you've got the same sort of clump of grass here, same clump of grass here. What we can do is right click and choose to flip that horizontally. So now you've got an area coming down this way and you've got the same but in the opposite direction here. Let's again just stretch those out over the edge of the canvas and that gives you more of a foreground. We can also stretch it down ever so slightly. Again, it lengthens things, it makes it look different to the layer previous. We then obviously want a foreground as well. So we're looking for something nice and grassy, lots of texture to it. Let's go in with number 28. Again, this element here is this element from the previous layer. So tonally, they all work beautifully together, but this just gives us a little something extra to add into our design. So if we want a little bit more grass in the foreground, that can tuck down to the bottom. So I'm just using my mouse, holding onto it and dragging and dropping. And then the mid piece that we've just put down, we can extend that all the way down. So we haven't got any white bits showing, okay? The final layer to create our scene is obviously a lovely sky. So let's go ahead and navigate to background builder followed by skies. And let's choose one of the skies. So we're going to go nice summer feeling on this one. If you wanted something, maybe you want to do a sunset. We've got lovely sunsets for you in here. See how you can change the look and the feel. Maybe you want something a little bit more prominent with the sort of haze of the sun coming in and those lovely clouds against the blue sky. So again, you can change all of these up. We've even got, look at this, this is beautiful, rainy skies and a rainbow. So again, it's down to personal preference how you want to finish your particular background design. But for me to keep in keeping with what we've already created, I'm going to go ahead and select number 3. Again, just stretch that out slightly, just so it overlaps the edge of the canvas. Now everything's aligned, but you see how that piece that we've added is in front of the mountains of things, and that doesn't make sense. All we need to do is right click and select order and scroll down to send to back. Now our sky is right in the background. We've got the mountains coming forward. We've then got this other piece we've put down to give you more foreground across that grassy texture right in the foreground of our design too, okay? That is giving us our background design, and this piece is going to be an element we're going to use throughout this triptych design that we're using. So at this stage, before we add anything else, what we want to do is select all, okay? I'm going to tell that clever little machine, which is Minecraft Studio, to group everything together. Now we have got the option to size everything together. So it recognizes it as one file, okay? What I personally like to do at this stage is make sure I've got all my canvases open, because we're making a triptych. We need this 3 times. So I'm going to go ahead and select new. Again, take the ruler and the grid off, because that's how we like to work. We're going to go ahead back to page 0, click on that element that we've been working with to highlight it. We're going to copy, and then we're going to move to page 1, and we're going to paste. Okay, so now we've got on page 0 and on page 1 that same background that we have created. Because we're making a triptych, we're going to have another page in there. So page 2, take the ruler and the grid lines off, and once again paste that into place. So now we have the exact same image on pages 0, pages 1 and pages 2. However, to make this feel like a cohesive design, what you want to do is think about how this would look in your frame. So on page 0, you see here, we've got the grasslands off to one side and this sort of mountain coming up to the edge. What we can do is click on page 1, click on the whole image, so the whole image is selected. We can then right click and flip that whole image horizontally. So now when it is in our frame, you'll have page 1 with the mountain leading up and also this element leading up. Because we've then flipped it horizontally, your mountain will now come down the other side, leading into page 3, which is page 2 on this, your third design, which is back to the start again. So it gives you a nice point of difference. It makes it feel like the whole of the background is across the entire triptych frame. Of course, each one of these could be a card design in their own right, but it just gives you the option to create everything in one go off that same canvas, okay? So let's think about our composition. What we want to do is balance the piece. So imagine this as 3 elements laid out together. Let's start on the right-hand side of the triptych. So we click into page 2, and this brings us to this design with the mountain going up to the side. Let's create a composition on here, which we can then follow through as a story throughout the rest of the whole detailing. So maybe we want something to break up this background here. So let's go ahead back into our background builder. There's lots of things like different foliage, different trees, different structures we could include in this. And one thing that is really nice is an element that goes across your triptych to pull the whole design together. And an easy way to achieve that is by using something like number 23 on this design, which is this little, almost like a barbed wire kind of fence, a little fence design. We can make it smaller. I've stretched it across the whole of the design. Just make it slightly smaller so the posts feel in keeping with the perspective. And that gives us something that we can use as a tangible element across the triptych design, okay? Next, what we want to do is focus on our foreground, our story that we're going to be telling within this design. So we've introduced those posts in the background. Let's go ahead and start building a story around those posts. So within the Wherever the Wind Goes, we do have a lovely little Minecraft Studio file, which is called Building Foundations. And this is going to create snap to a foreground for your composition. So here we have that posts. So the story that we're telling is we've got these posts in the distance. We're looking at one in isolation right in the foreground of our design. You've got the sort of barbed wire pieces around it. It looks like maybe this fence has broken down over time and it's just added into the whole feel and look. Let's go ahead and decorate that, okay? So at the moment, we have this wavy line to the bottom of our post. What we want to do is nestle that really and truly into the countryside design. So we can do that in any number of ways. We could include details around it, maybe things like the sacks of by the pound, we can nestle that in so now it feels like that post is behind the little grain bags there. You can also achieve that same sort of feel with flowers. So see how you're nestling those down, stretch the flowers out, and that grounds that post in a story around it. You're bringing that foreground into sharp focus. Let's have a look at some of the other flowers we could use within this design. So let's go to What a Dam and into scene building. You're going to find this one a very, very handy little folder you'll come back to time and time again. Not only do we have very pretty flowers in the marsh marigold, I'm going to drag and drop those into our design, but we've also then got a whole host of different grasses. Now these are super, super useful. So let's grab a couple of these onto the area around our design, and these are going to be so handy for grounding everything together. When we say grounding, it's positioning it, it's giving it that little place and feel within the world. So let's go ahead and size these flowers down. So I'm going to be using the marsh marigolds. I'm using the banding boxes around just to make them a little bit smaller so they're more in keeping with the size of the post itself. And we can also use the circle at the top to change the orientation, the way those are positioned. Let's go ahead and pop some of those flowers down to the edge like so. But maybe I want another little composition of flowers just so we haven't got one, we've got another piece mirroring it. Let's go ahead, select the item, the element we're working with, right click and choose to copy and paste, okay? It will load it on top of the previous one. So what we need to do is drag and drop. But of course, being nature, we wouldn't have carbon copies of every single flower. So let's make it feel a little bit different. First things first, if we right click and flip that horizontally, already the flowers are facing a different direction. And of course, we can use the banding boxes around the outside to squeeze that size down a little bit. The circle, again, I'm using that to change the direction of the flowers. And look how we can overlay those in front of the piece that we've laid down previously. Okay, so we got flowers on flowers like so. We then need to ground those flowers into place. So this is where those grasses are going to come in super, super useful because they add a little bit of texture without taking away from the overall image. So again, we can size them up if we need to. These are going to, you see how they're slipping behind the marsh marigold that we copied and pasted? That's because anything we put down next on a layer will come up first within the composition. So we need to right click on those grasses, order, and bring that to the front. It's just that subtle little bit of grass line over the flowers that softens them, but it also then helps nestle this post into place as well. Similarly, we've got other grasses we can use. So again, just laying those down, giving you lots of texture in this foreground, right clicking and bringing to the front. So you've got even more grasses. And do consider having these sort of things, these elements, not just stopping dead at the edge of the page, have them overlapping. Because what we can do is right click and crop those down, click on the element. You see how those banding boxes change to a grey colour? That means we can then crop them down to fit in with the edge of the design. It stops it just stopping dead. It extends it and makes you feel like there's more of a world behind the bounds of the canvas we're working on. Once you're happy with your crop, you click OK and you've got your grasses in place there. Now, this little area behind the posts, I feel needs a little bit more texture to it and a little bit more grass, as does this side of the post as well, just so we're drawing those elements together. So let's go ahead and select another one of those grasses. This time around, let's make it bigger and let's also change the orientation. But I want it behind that post. Okay, so I'm positioning it so the bottom is hidden behind the flowers there. It's just giving you a little bit of detailing off the side. But if we right click and order it, and we have to send back just a couple of times until it sits behind that post. So just right clicking, sending backwards until it fits within the realms of where we want it to sit. So order, send backwards, and see how now it's sat behind that post. It just softens that edge too. Here, we need a few more grasses. Again, all we're doing is just nestling this down, this sort of feel down into the whole design. Again, changing the way the leaves on the grass or the stalks of the grass sit just by using that little circle at the top. And once again, order, send backwards, order, send backwards, order, and send backwards until we've got it sitting behind those lovely flowers to the foreground. Same thing at the back here. Let's go in this time with another one of those grasses, but because we want the fronds of the grass, the stalks and stems of those grasses, facing in opposite direction just to fill this little space around, making a composition around this post. This time we want to flip horizontally, size, and just change the orientation until we're happy with how it's sitting, how much of the grass you can see behind this post. So using the post as a way to disguise the edge of the grass, and just making sure we're filling that little gap there as well. Same thing again, we want to order and send it back behind the post. When it comes to compositions, what I tend to do is add the largest pieces first and build the story around that, because then you know how much space you've got to fill. You can see instantly the areas that need just an added little bit of grounding, added little bit of texture to make it all make sense within the design. And it's well worth taking the time to add these elements in just as we've done like so. Once again, what we would like to do, just because these are coming over the edge of the canvas here, we need to click them and crop, click again, and just bring those in line with the edge of the canvas that we're working on and click OK. So we've made that little composition there. We need a character. We need someone to feature within this story. I thought what better than a pigeon on here, but of course you could add any number of the characters that we have included within the 2 Red Robins Scene Building Volume 12. So pigeons, where are you? Let's have a look in Touch by Rain. Let's have a scroll down because it could be one of our lovely chaffinches. They could be sitting on the post, for example, if you wanted to. You could have one of the mice, you could have the snails. We will actually have one of the snails, but I thought let's go with a lovely little dove. So here we have our dove. Again, an interesting thing if you're making a design like this, think about the direction in which your characters are facing. So here, if we pop our little dove on top of the post or the pigeon on top of the post, that would be, in my eyes, the start of the triptych, because he's looking into the rest of the triptych design. But because this is the far right of the triptych, what we want him to do is look into the design. So let's flip him horizontally. Now he's looking in the right direction for our design. And let's just size him down ever so slightly so he sits within the realms of possibility on our post there as well. Now, we need to crop him ever so slightly because his tail's hanging over, or we could just nip him in a little bit so he sits further in on the post like so. Add little elements too. So here we've got this gorgeous little snail. So he comes onto the screen quite big. If we size him right down into the realms of what a snail would be in this composition, we could have him just bimbling along on the edge of the post there as well. So again, elements within your story, find things that you can add to make your viewer do a second take, okay? So as it stands, we're quite happy with how that particular element of the triptych is looking. Let's now move on to the middle one. So this is where you're going to have more of an open space, but we need to continue this line of the fence post through the full triptych. So rather than dragging a new one onto the canvas, what I'm going to do is select copy, because this is then going to be the same size, to then paste onto this element too. So this element, these edge of the rails and things like that will line up with the elements that we've used on the other page. Okay, so this leads into this element. If we flip that, oh no, sorry, let me just go back. If at any stage you click the wrong thing and flip it the wrong way or delete it or whatever it is, you've got a lovely little handy button up here, undo, and it snaps back to the previous design. If you're struggling to select any element, you can go into layers here at the side and choose to flick between the two. Once you've highlighted your piece, that has the banding boxes, so you can be assured that's the one you're flipping and rotating. So let's go ahead and flip the fence. So this side panel of the fence now joins up with this side panel of the fence in our previous canvas. But again, another little story that I wanted to include in this is the idea that these fences and posts and things like that have broken down over time. So what we can go ahead and do is actually trim away some of the fences. So keeping that element selected, let's use our scissors. This new box then appears. We can scroll right in to see exactly where we're trimming. And we can choose to trim away a section of this fence. So maybe we take our pointer and we follow the line down along one of these posts, just clicking, just like a pair of scissors, we're just snipping this element away like so, okay? We can then come right along the design. We can even scroll out if we need to, right along the design. And we're going to trim away this part of the fence, leaving just this element here to give the idea that this part of the fence has broken down and faded away over time. You have a choice whether to keep the inner, so that will be anything within the blue box that you've just cut away, or keep the outer. And in this case, let's keep the outer. And if I scroll back out, that will give you the composition for your middle of your triptych design. So we've done the right-hand side with the fence leading across to the middle, just like so. Now we need to concentrate on filling our space on the far left-hand side of our triptych too. So remember, it's the same background design, we're adding different compositions. So a fun way to add in a little bit of composition and make it balance. Let's hop back to our lovely little dove, our little pigeon on top of our post. And maybe we want this same composition of the flowers repeated on our first panel. So the left-hand side one. We can go ahead and say, I don't want the background in, I don't want the fence in. I want to leave all of the grass, all of the elements, but I want to do away with the snail and the dove. Now that's not hidden them, they've not disappeared, they've not been deleted, they're just not showing on this element because they are not selected. We've just unchecked those boxes, leaving us with just the composition like so. It might be that we just want the flowers, okay? What we can do, uncheck anything you don't want. You can then press and hold on the left-hand mouse button and select all of those pieces in one go, okay? We can choose to group those, and that then becomes an element in its own right. We can right-click and copy and take that along to page 0, which is our leftmost panel in our triptych. Paste, and it will paste in the same position as what we've just copied it from. Before we do anything else, just as a matter of making life easy, let's go ahead and check those boxes back on to put all of those elements back in place on our design, okay? Back to page 0, which is our leftmost triptych design. We now have got this lovely little composition of florals. So we're not having to do the same thing again. We've got the option there if we want to recreate this element on the other side of the triptych. But of course, because it's on this side, we need to flip horizontally, and that whole group composition flips as well. Just then taking it over to the edge of the canvas, aligning those edges up. This time around, we're going to go with a really subtle composition. So we've got the flowers, we haven't got the fence. Remember, the fence broke down in the middle of the triptych, so we haven't got any fence coming across this particular element. But let's go ahead and add another character. So again, it could be any number from these designs. It could be one of the beavers from Rotterdam. I mean, they would look quite fun sat within our composition like so. It could be, what have we got in Wandering Wilderness? We've got lovely horses and things. You know, if you wanted to have a whole field of horses in the background, scale them down so they're in perspective. And now it looks like you've got a whole field of horses in the background as well. So lots and lots of options to play with on this one. I did spot a really sweet little mouse in Wherever the Wind Goes. So I thought he might be quite sweet, our Bobby the mouse, in this particular composition. But what we can do is just go ahead and remember what we were saying about having the dove or the pigeon facing into the composition. We want to do the same thing with our mouse here. So right click and flip him horizontally. So now he's looking into the rest of the design. Of course, he's way too big. Bear in mind, you're going to be balancing him against a dove that's this size. You want to go ahead and scroll him right down and pop him just in the background. Now, at the moment, I just moved my flowers. Again, we can click the undo to undo that. At the moment, he's right in the foreground. Now, I think being a little mouse, he would be quite timid. So he does need to go back into the background of the composition. Rather than putting more grass in front, what we can choose to do is click on our flowers and ungroup. We would then have to move everything and flip everything in its own right. So it's up to you. It's whichever one you have time for. Either choose to ungroup and flip everything individually, or group and reflip that horizontally so it sits back in. And we can then choose to go in with just another little bit of grass to ground him into the composition. And actually, let me share this with you. We have a really lovely grass in Background Builder. He is in Foliage and Structures. Let's go ahead and find it. Number 17. This adds a whole lot of grass very quickly and very easily to the design. You see how that then grounds your little mouse in the design? Once again, we can crop. So click on it, crop, click on it again. Those boxes, banding boxes will change colour just so you can edge that in so it lines up with the rest of your canvas. And we need to scroll out so we can see the OK button. Okay. Now what we can do, because we've added grass to this element in our leftmost triptych, let's go ahead and add that same element along here just to ground everything together on our rightmost, which is page 2. Make that a little bit bigger, make it a little bit different from the last one we used. Just bringing that in so you've got the grass line along the bottom of the design. Click it and crop. Click it again to get those grey boxes up and scroll that in so it matches the line of the canvas. And let's just scroll out again using the icon of the magnifier and click OK. So at this stage, what we have created is your leftmost triptych with your little mouse composition and flowers. We've then got our very plain central piece to our triptych design, just with that fence coming along. And we've also got our rightmost of our triptych design on page 2 as well. At this stage, what you want to consider is what size is this going to be and how are you going to print it? What frame are you going to be using? My frame measures, I think is about 6 by 4 inches, the apertures within it. And you can actually size everything in Minecraft Studio to fit those apertures exactly as well. So if we go ahead and select everything on this page and group it together so it's one file, we're going to repeat that process on the middle page as well. So select all and group. And page 2 as well, the rightmost triptych, select all and group. Now those 3 pages are all of that same one file design, which means we can come down to the bottom here. You see where it says width, height. We can even change it to inches if we want to, just by checking that little box with a little tick next to inches. We can select the width to be 4 inches. And we can select that little icon there means it's an aspect ratio. It means you can change the width and the height independently. So if we click 4 inches and hit the return button, once we've got it selected, remember if anything doesn't work, make sure you've got your item, your element selected. So 4 inches down, and the height we want to be 6 inches to fit this frame, like so, okay? So now we've got our little piece of canvas measuring 4 by 6 inches. We want to go ahead and do the same for the middle of the triptych. So again, selecting it, changing to inches, selecting the aspect ratio so we can change the width and height independently. Width 4 inches and hit the return key. And height, again, select it, make sure you always select it. Height will be 6 inches, hit the return key. So now you've got that one to the right size as well. I'm going to go ahead and do the final one as well. Page 2, our rightmost triptych, select the element we are sizing, change to inches, and select that little icon there so we can change the width and the height independently. Width is 4 inches, hit that return key, Make sure you're selecting the item you are changing, and the width will be 6 inches. Sorry, height will be 6 inches. So now you've got everything sized to 4 by 6 inches to fit potentially the frame that you'll be working with. Again, it depends on what you're working with as to what size you'll make it. However, another little tip, if you are printing this out, obviously you want to save paper. So what we can do is take the element from page 1, right click, copy and paste it onto page 2. Squeeze them up so they sit together. So you see how we've created, what we've done here is that idea of the mountain joining together, the foreground joining together, the fence coming across. It gives you an idea of where we're going with this triptych design. We also have space on this canvas. Again, we're making the most of the printing paper we're using here. To go ahead, do the same thing again. Click onto your image, copy, travel back to page 0 and paste that other element on. Okay, so you're looking at this and thinking, okay, that is how your triptych would look within your frame, but this little piece we just need to tweak so it sits here and we can print all of these elements in one go. So we're taking that circle at the top and we're just turning it through 90 degrees so we can print that element too. Give them a little bit more space at the top and on the sides, and that way you can print all 3 of your triptych elements in one go if you are working with a 6 by 4 frame as an example. Remember, when it comes to printing, you want to make sure you're printing in colour, of course, and do consider printing on our lovely new premium pure print because it's going to give you a really, really sharp and high quality definition to your designs. What I will just do is change that back through to 0 degrees and line that back up so you can see how this triptych look would come together. Scroll it up just so it's a little bit bigger. Group those together. And so it fills the page so you can kind of get a feel for the kind of look, the kind of design that we're going through. That story continuing of that fence, bringing those 2 panels together. You've got that same composition of the florals, almost like a little corner of both sides of the triptych design. Our animals, our characters are looking in, so you get that sense of this little world being confined to this one little aspect. Of course, the mountain ranges, just going through everything joining together. And of course, our little characters almost in conversation with one another. Bobby the mouse and our wonderful little pigeon design too. So once you're happy, you can go ahead, print those out, then add them to your frame, as we've mentioned, just like so. And that gives you a wonderful little design. Now, of course, all of those elements, everything that we've just been through, you can utilize and change the elements you're working with to tell your story of how you want it to look. And of course, change the characters, change the feel to create a lovely triptych landscape using Minecraft Studio Scene Building Volume 12. Perhaps dig out your other Minecraft Studio USBs and have a go with it as well. Thank you very, very much for joining me for today's workshop, and I hope to see you again very, very soon.
If you want to see more from Highlight Crafts, make sure you click the like button, subscribe by clicking the subscribe button below, and click the bell icon to receive notifications of all of our future content. You can also click here to see our latest video, or click here to see more videos like this one.